Today we are going to be discussing what we did for our latest sprint. So that's the 2 week period that we did the previous 2 weeks. So not this week, but the previous two. Um, what we accomplished, what our thoughts are on it, and then what we've been discussing between us on improvements of the game and our MVP. So we got a lot to talk about.
So, just for context, we should probably A, introduce ourselves, and then B, talk about the how we run our sprints, because everybody runs their sprints differently. So, I guess for the intros.
Yeah, so I'm Tony. I'm the Lazy Warlock, and I'm the lead developer and artist on Lords of Nysera. So I do most of the code, and I do most of the design and world building and such, and storytelling for the game. And yeah, that's what I do, and that's what I've been doing for the last couple years on the game.
That was such a quick recap. Yes, I've been doing this game for like a million years, and now it's out. No, I love it. It's funny because I get to see just all of the process behind the scenes, etc., and all of the little details and things that go on. So, uh, it's always funny when he's like, "Oh yeah, I'm just doing this thing now," because he's worked his butt off on it. So, so humble.
So what do you do, Lilette? Even though it says producer in your name now.
Yeah, I guess as of right now, I am working a lot on game design and thinking through just how people play the game, as well as I'm doing a bunch of case studies at the moment, just trying to figure out, what the core gameplay is that makes a game good. And folks in our Discord server are probably familiar with me just like starting these left field discussions about this topic just in different ways. But producer wise, like what is a game producer? They are interested in the production of the game. So that's stuff like timeline. So, for example, the sprinting stuff, I manage a lot of our sprints. Anything that Tony ends up working on is because we discussed it deliberately, and that's something that producer does. We kind of play like a product manager role in a way. And then we also do some marketing stuff, and we're interested in just like the QA bit. So I'm super invested in just our QA playtesting team in our Discord, which you guys are great, by the way. I see some of you in the audience, and I'm so thankful for just the feedback. So I just wanted to call that out. And it's also just been so much fun. We find some funny bugs. So, yeah, that's what I do. Okay, so we can talk about the sprints now. So how do we run the sprints? Tony, maybe you can tell us about the sticky note method, like how we start them, and then anything pertinent.
Yeah, so we do sprint, and a sprint is what we refer to as like a more or less a work block, right? So not even a work week, but like a block of work that we want to accomplish for the game. We section it out into 2 weeks, and so what we'll do is we'll grab a sticky note and we'll write out all the things that we want done by that 2 week block. It doesn't have to be done, but it's something that we intend to try and finish, right? In that 2 week section. So um, it can be anything that we need to do for the game, because there's a lot to do, right? There's so many things to work on. It's important to stay focused and to really prioritize specific things that you want to do, and kind of to stay in a rhythm as well, as opposed to working on a few things here and there. So, for example, we can go over what we made a list for last week, or for our last sprint, right?
Sure. Also, side note too. So, could we show them what we're talking about? Can you pull up the Jira board?
Sure.
Just for funsies, really quick, just show and tell. This is actually something that you'll see other games do, where they'll list out what they're working on, the bugs that have been reported, etc., on a Trello board. There's like so many project management tools out there, different kinds. So we use Jira, but we're pretty transparent about what we're working on and such. So we don't mind people looking at it.
This one looks pretty boring.
Well, I mean, they're not exactly entertaining either. Let's be real. Actually, somebody commented on the Kickstarter today, and they said They said, well, it's probably a lot more entertaining listening to someone else's sprint recap. Because, like, in the world of business, sprint recaps are boring. So, I think that is very much true, I guess, if, like, you're talking about work, but what's fun is we're making a game, so talking about any part of the game is a lot more entertaining than a work sprint will ever be. So, any questions from the audience? And you can put them in the Speaker Sunday channel. And I'm just kind of monitoring that one right now. And then I can.
So this is not the Jira board, but it's related to it. But it looks a lot more impressive than the like two things we had on the Jira board.
Yeah, so we have like a. This is the total list, right, of stuff that we have, and then how sprints work. This is actually a good segue into how sprints work. We take a look at what we can accomplish in 2 weeks. We'll just do that. So we have the whole list, and then we have the current sprint. So it's kind of nice because it puts the blinders on, so to speak, and forces you to focus on just what needs to be done. Someone in the audience asked, what was the biggest challenge for this sprint? And that's an excellent question, because every sprint, I feel like, comes with its own challenges.
So pretty much my latest sprint was tackling all of the bugs and soft locks and hard locks and just crashes that people reported in kind of the first couple weeks of the demo, and making sure that as many of those were removed as I could find in like a reasonable amount of time. And so I did all of those, so I made a list of all the ones I could remember that had those, and then any obvious like menu issues, anything that you couldn't click on and whatnot. I found that the tutorial was having a lot of issues because of the way I organized it, and it still has a few little issues. But in this case, it was the tutorial that was the bugger for some reason. It kept having problems with preventing people from selecting things, and for the most part, it's fixed now. It just has to like have a few changes to make it look cleaner with where like sometimes it doesn't go away. But other than that, like the last one was actually not too hard because it was all just direct fixes, and they were reported really well. So it was very easy to just jump right into it, replicate what someone said, and then fix it. So um, after I did all that, though, then I got to jump right into working on Chapter 3 because I finished about a week early with my sprint because I made the big, gigantic list, and then Colette was like, you should do a smaller list to make sure you can get to it all because it feels better to get to it all as opposed to not. So I said, okay, I'll pare that down. So I pared it down by about half and then finished it really quickly. So I just moved right into, and as she described, when you finish your sprint, you can then move on to the more fun things that you've been wanting to do maybe, but weren't essential, right? And so I did that. I started working on Chapter 3 because I was going to have to anyways for the next sprint. And so I just started prepping it, and then I got to plan out all these different things and finish up a few characters. And then that was really when the hardest thing came up, which was what I'm doing now, but that's not part of the sprint, so I can't answer that question.
It's classified. I'm just kidding.
Yes.
We don't know much about it just yet. The next question is, what is the best way to set up your sprints? Oh, actually, I guess I owe you my answer. Sorry about that. Let's see here. My biggest challenge was not taking into account that I also have a full-time job right now. That was my biggest challenge. I based the sprint off of what I could do in 40 hours, which per week. And I should have based it off of what time I actually have. And then also, I've never measured how long it takes to do a Feature Friday video. And we had released the Kickstarter do's and don'ts video. It was about 35 minutes long. it started an hour and 15 minutes long, and I pared it down to that, and it it took the entire sprint, you guys. So it was a really like frustrating moment for me because I had planned to do the game maker training, which Tony's going to give me the rundown of just what how I can assist with doing the bug fixes, etc. And we're both programmers, so it's like definitely not something that's out of I guess my wheelhouse. Is that what people say? Um, because we have to pick up new coding languages all the time at work. So I'm like, okay, all right, cool. I'll pick that up and start doing that, and that way we can do all of these fixes. Like I can work on like all of the prologue chapter and then chapter one while he's creating the new chapters, and we can kind of just like double up and move forward in that fashion. Me refining, him making new content. So I was really excited to do the game maker training, but I was very frustrated that I didn't complete it. And frankly, training like that, it for like a 17-hour Udemy class, like it is it's 17 hours, but you want to double it, you know, um, because you have to digest the information and practice it and stuff like that. So yeah, I like was like, oh, I'll do a video and I'll do this 40-hour thing in 2 weeks, and did not take into account that I have that full-time job. So I got a little angry. I was like, dang it, I wish I could contribute more to the game than I can, but I it really made me face the music as far as like what I can reliably provide. So taking that learning forward with the next sprint, I have to reduce that hourage to like what I would say, to be safe, like 2 hours each day. So 2 times 5 is 10 hours. That's 20 hours total. And then we could flex that because like I always tend to work more, um, but yeah. So that's gonna be my bandwidth. Whereas like Tony's on it full time, right? So so yeah. So that was my biggest challenge. I bit off more than I can chew, and I'm gonna take that forward. And I also a win though is I learned how much time it actually takes to do a full feature YouTube video, and it takes 2 weeks at least with like me having a full time job, being able to put 20 hours in. And yeah, like a 35-minute YouTube video, at least for me at my level of editing, how quickly I can get things done, takes like 10 to 20 hours to edit. So the smaller videos, no problem. I can do those with a minimal edits. But yeah, so that is sad though, because like I really like video editing. So, but I am gonna have to put that aside to make sure I prioritize things. Because I'm really excited to work on the prologue and chapter one, and we want to get ready for a little special event thingy that we're trying to get the demo all polished up for in February, like this upcoming February. So it's gonna be a big milestone for us. So moving on to the next question here. What is the best way to set up your sprints? Do you want to take that one on, Tony? And there's additional stuff on this question, just heads up.
So I don't know the best way to set it up. I know how we set it up, and that's pretty much we make sure that on the day before the sprint, we plan it out with sticky notes. And a sticky note for us is kind of nice because it forces you to condense your thoughts into small snippets, right? You cannot cram 50 things on there, and so you have to make just a few little things, right? And you have to kind of summarize, and it lets you stay focused, more or less, if you can limit it to just a sticky note. Because I have a gigantic like spreadsheet of all the things I want to add to the game, right? But if I tried to approach the sprint doing it that way, I would get distracted so quickly by like, oh well, I want to add in this item now, or I want to start working on this character now. Like and sometimes I'll add something to the sticky note if it was necessary to complete another one, right? So like last week, I was working on firearms, and but I was actually working on one of the new characters, and then I realized, oh, I don't have some of the code for this thing, so I did that to finish her, and then I added in that little section to my sticky note that it was, that part was also added. So um, I am not good at adding my stuff to the Jira board though, because I'm a tactile person. So to me, the sticky note is good enough in my little monkey brain. Um, but then I keep getting reminded that I have to like put those in the board to let her know and include myself, my future self, know that that was done. So um, I guess to answer the question, stay small and within the scope of your sprints, right? Do not think like the sprints are meant to be long term and that you have like a long term goal in mind, but the sprints are meant to keep you focused. So use something that helps you stay focused. In our case, sticky notes. And that's one sticky note too. It's not like you can chain a few of them together.
Yeah, and the sticky notes are really helpful to just put on your computer. So you've got like a focus, and because you might have like a lot of things that you need to get done for that sprint, less ticky tacky smaller things like bug fixes, etc. But it's really helpful to just have an overall message and theme for the sprint because it keeps that bigger picture in mind. The best way to set up a sprint, though, in my opinion, is making sure that you are not letting this, or you are remembering the intent of the sprint, which is to be focused, and documentation too. So,
Could you explain the number counting aspect too? Because I think that's really valuable for like what sprints can also tell you about your work pace, like the actual pace of how fast you can do things.
yeah, okay. So we use the Fibonacci way of counting how much work or effort it'll take to do something. So if something, let's say, takes a day to do, then it is equal to 1 point of work. And if something takes the entire sprint to do, it's equal to 8 points of work. And the reason why it's called Fibonacci is the points don't go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The points actually go in a Fibonacci sequence. So you can only put 1, 2, 5, or 8. There's a reason behind this. The reason is, in our minds, like if we made it a linear step spectrum, be like, oh, this to mop the floor, that's a 1. To clean the entire room, like a 4, right? But the Fibonacci method says 4 doesn't exist. You can't list 4, and you can only list 5. So like, okay, cleaning the room, that's equal to 5 points of effort. And the reason for that is the Fibonacci sequence. This is so mathy and I love it. I'm so sorry, you guys. But it is like exponential, right? In our human brains, we're like, oh, work is linear. But the Fibonacci sequence forces you to think in the bigger the project is, it's not like, it's exponentially larger than the previous level of work. So it kind of forces you to add on and recognize that, hey, bigger projects are going to take more time and then some. So that's why the point system is really helpful. And specifically, not like linear steps, but the Fibonacci way where you can only enter those values. So, and at the end of the sprint, too, you only have bandwidth to do up to 8 points. So you can do 8 1-pointers. You could do a 5-pointer and a 3-pointer. But in general, like, it gives you an idea of just how much you can accomplish. And you'll start to get into this stride where maybe Tony finds out he just consistently keeps doing 10 points of work every sprint. And the point system is like really helpful for reflecting and seeing um, what you can do every sprint, what you consistently do, because it's really subjective. And it's especially in game development, it's really hard to tell just how long things will take. So, and that's another thing too. I really like the idea that sprints are breaking down a really large project, because the more you can break it down, the better you can quantify it. Because if it gets too large in your mind, there comes a point where it's just impossible to quantify. And then when you get questions from people like, how long is this going to take? Then it's just like way too big in your mind, and you might just give like the wrong estimate and then overpromise something.
So for an example of what a point looks like for me, right? Because we said all these numbers, you may be wondering, well, what's a point look like for developing Lords of Nysera then? And I think a good example of this would be an item, a singular item, right? So one item, which is from the start of the design to including it in the game, is 1 point for me. So I can do about, if all I did was work on items for a week, I could add approximately 8 fully fleshed out implemented items to the game. That's assuming that the features that they utilize even um, are also in the game, right? But that's not included in like that point. That point is, okay, I need to think of a name, draw it up, make sure the pixel art looks nice, include it in the game, and then actually make sure the code worked out properly, that it had its like attack animations are right, and then sometimes even add a recipe, right? So that's all 1 point usually, and that's not always like a day, because some things are faster than others, but that's roughly how it shakes out, right? A character's portrait is totally different. So character's portrait takes a lot more effort. Um, a portrait is about 3 points for me. So it's a lot more drawing, and that's not even making the character. Making the whole character easily is 8 points. So you kind of you figure those things out, and that's what these sprints especially have been really nice for me, because I've kind of just meandered my way through making lots of things whenever I needed them for years, and actually having like these structured times where I know exactly what I'm working on because I've written it down, and then I know exactly how long it took to do them. I can properly rank them all so that when we are looking forward towards that February date, we'll know whether or not we can get 5 or 6 extra items in the game, or a new chapter, or whatever it may be that we want to have in before the end.
So, next question, uh, how do we determine what should go in each sprint?
So from my end, it's kind of like the most immediate thing that's important, right? So for the um, in the case of our first sprint, we had a lot of bugs from people playtesting, and so it was most important to get those big bad bugs fixed so that people can they could play the demo and not be frustrated trying to play it, right? There might be things that we have to change gameplay wise, but those take longer, and I needed to focus on get those fixes done so that people can play it and be like, oh, these are my thoughts on the design or the gameplay itself, right? So they're not just reporting the same bugs, for example, um, and that they're not crashing and complaining about it, which not many people complained about any crashes or anything, but I didn't want that, right? So that was my priority, so that's what I did. um, the next thing is that, like, okay, we know we need chapters, like that's the goal, right? So my next priority was I need to start doing the chapter work, and that's a huge block of time, right? That's like a 8 times 4, so that's a 24 point thing. Hopefully is like takes about a month to make a chapter, is what we're guessing. We don't know yet because we haven't done the full hashing out of it all, but just prior like you pretty much you I ended up just prioritizing what I need right now, based off of feedback, and then once that was satisfied in my mind, then I could move on to something else, because there's always going to be this buildup of bugs, right? And well, that's kind of taught me that like it doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to be like good and functioning for now, because there's going to be a lot of refinement going on.
And that's actually something, just sidebar, I am so like I just want to sink my teeth into all of the things that the playtesting team has uh, discovered so far, so we can just move on to the next thing. Like there's that bug testing level, right, where you're just making sure that the gameplay is good and smooth, and then there's the level I actually really want to get into, which is how should we do these menus? How should you navigate the map? What are the useful things that would be helpful to the player? For example, we were discussing the other night the when a unit levels up, which stat is more likely to be increased. Like, how do you know that? We do have those little metrics. Like, if there's a really buff dude, he's going to have a higher chance to increase, to get a point in the strength stat than other, maybe like a more flimsy, dexterous kind of unit. So, but we didn't have like okay, this stat is way more likely to increase upon level up versus the other ones, metric in there.
Right, there's only this like very subtle indication through like the bars, but that's not enough, right? I didn't even intend for that to be the indicator. So there's literally no way for people to know what it is right now.
Yeah, to give credit, Tony's thought about these things. I think there's that other level of when you take a completely new player, what do they see? Like, I actually asked someone who's not as familiar with TRPGs, right? So that's an even tougher take. But I asked them, hey, look at this. Tell me what you see. And she didn't interpret it in that way. So, like, you might know the ins and outs of your game, but what really matters at the end of the day is how are people going to know what this symbol means or what that symbol means. And thankfully there's a lot of standards we can take from the gaming industry, because games kind of copy each other, right? Like, there's a lot of cool symbols and stuff that people just instantaneously recognize that we can lean on. So the next question here is, do you plan multiple sprints ahead or create a new sprint every week as you develop? Okay, I'm going to answer this one, Tony. So do you multiple sprints ahead? At this time, not yet. I'm sure we'll be doing that as we get a better gauge of our bandwidth, but this is the first time that we are really measuring what we can accomplish. Tony is a lot more familiar than I am with what his bandwidth looks like because he's been developing it. He actually like got a sprint done, completed it, and I could not say the same for myself. So that just, there's a little bit of like tightening on seeing what the team, aka like what we both can handle, and it's just gonna be time. So once we get into the swing of things, then we can plan ahead. But typically in the business world too, you don't plan sprints very far ahead. It's kind of like, you know, your priorities of all of the issues that you can pull in. But especially with game making, things come up, like maybe someone finds a game-breaking bug, and you just have to put that in the sprint, and it's going to boot something else out. So even if we do plan ahead, it's going to be perhaps a sprint ahead. Now, we can and will have a roadmap, which has the broad strokes of when we expect certain chapters to be finished. And right now, it's a chapter a month. And we've got 13 months of development, and then Tony is working on chapter 3. So you can kind of do the math. We'll have a little bit of room to playtest before February comes.
And those maps will be like being play tested before we're done with them all, right? Like, we're not going to hit 12 or 11 chapters and then start play testing it, right? They're going to be consecutively play tested, because they're going to need to be refined over time. We're going to be chasing that MVP we keep talking about as well, so that, like, hopefully by when we have the first couple chapters out, we already have that zeroed in, right? So the play testing will start earlier than that. For those who are wondering.
Yeah. And then creating a new sprint every week as you develop. So our sprints are 2 weeks in length. as of right now, it's not uncommon for people to have a very small sprint, so a sprint lasting 1 week for a special occasion. So perhaps maybe in the future we'll have a Steam event where we need to make sure we get certain things out. So we might break our sprints up into two just right before the event. But we always have a default length, and for us it's 2 weeks. And 2 weeks is really nice because it allows you to develop bigger stuff. So let's say like Tony needed to get a couple characters in, or he needs to add in this totally new feature. It gives him the time to go through and do that. But it's not long enough that you forget what you did in the first part of the sprint and you can't reflect on it and learn what you could have done better. So I think it's just like 2 weeks to make sure that it's still fresh in your mind and you're reflecting, and every sprint you're getting better at something. But yeah, these are great questions, you guys. Someone said, Tony, not cool with that tease. that was a little bit ago now, but when you mentioned something that you couldn't talk about further. So let's go right into like what we had in our sprint. I guess we already talked about that. Maybe we can recap. What were you working on sprint number 1? Really quick.
For sprint number 1, it was prologue bug fixes, tutorial fixes, and general menu soft locks and crashes. And then after that, the sprint expanded into preparations for chapter 3. And that's kind of a general term, but more or less that includes sprite work for new spells, cleaning up and adding in new dialogue, and then just in general, like making the map itself. So the map, the whole map, which is displayed right now, like that's, believe it or not, doing the map like that is actually a 1 point. So it only takes 1 point about a day to map the whole thing out. But then it's a lot more effort to actually test the map and make sure all the scenes work. So I didn't do any of that stuff. It was just preparation to throw stuff into the map. And this week has all been about finishing that preparation, and not really preparation so much as like it's feature creation. So, so yeah, did I answer your question? I think I did.
My sprint consisted of the Game Maker training, which Tony really wanted me to do, and then I ended up doing the video instead to just get that out. I wanted to do the video because the Kickstarter do's and don'ts were really fresh on our minds, so was just hoping to help anyone else who'd be interested, really. And then also future us when we launch our 2nd and 3rd Lords of Nysera games. So that was what was in my sprint. I also had a bunch of Jira stuff that I'm happy I took care of. We had to set up a lot of stuff for our playtesters to be able to view if they've already submitted something. Just a place for them to see if they're not like repeating bug submissions, and amongst some other admin stuff. But yeah, and I would say, so I guess, how did our sprint go? Like 10 out of 10, how did our sprint go? I would say my sprint went poorly because I didn't budget enough time to do all of the things I wanted to do. And so there was spillage, I guess, is what you would call it. So there's some stuff that I had to put in the next sprint to do. But it was successful because I had a lot of learnings from it, you know. So even in failures, it's really nice to just take these learnings and, continue forward and stuff. And I was also bummed out because it's like the first sprint. Come on. But I got ambitious, you know. So, yeah. So I would say I would make my sprint like a 5 out of 10. I'm kind of a harsh critic. I would say even like a 3 out of 10, but there was some wins in there because I did learn.
I mean, it was also the biggest video you ever edited too. Like we've done streams where you just sort of leave it, right? Like you maybe do a few little things to it, but this one you did a ton of work on. I wasn't even expecting you to have to do that much work. And so it made sense because it was what, an hour of, or an hour plus of footage, and you had to edit it down to like 38 minutes or something. So that's a ton of work, not to mention like adding transitions, fixing stuff. Like you had a lot of work cut out for you. And it took us what, 2 days to do the feature Friday that was like 5 minutes, right? So it makes sense why it took that long. It wasn't for lack of trying. Is what I mean.
There was this point in the sprint where I was stressing out about it. Like, okay, half of the sprint is already taken up. I'm not going to have time to do the big thing that I wanted to do. Why didn't I do that first? But it was the first time, and this doesn't happen at work very often. So, and I was just telling this, so this is more a little personal. But it was the first time where I actually had like an emotional attachment to the thing that I was working on. Like at work, it's like I'm doing reports and stuff, and like I care about the people I'm working with and who I'm delivering these products for. But there's that degree of separation from the work. And this sprint was the first time I related very strongly to the experience that Tony's had to go through very early on that you guys haven't witnessed because this was years ago. And I even remember the conversations we had about this very thing, and I had to march my way through it in 2 weeks. So that emotional attachment to working on something that you care, or pulling yourself away from something that you care about, that's really tough. Really tough. So I experienced that firsthand.
And then I guess ranking mine, I mean, I did a 15 out of 10 then because I literally did more than I was planning. So averages out to, well, I mean, not averages, but if we add up our stars, we still did 10 out of 10 together.
Wow, you're so positive. Ew.
Yeah, I mean, I was really happy with what I got done because I got all the bugs that I set out to do. Some of them were tricky, some of them were not. And so I got them all. I didn't have to be like, oh, well, I couldn't get to it this week. I guess I have to do it later. I got them all done that I could think of. And then I got to get a really nice head start on the chapter. So I was very happy with how it went.
And then to answer your question from chat here, would each of you assign points differently if possible? The answer is yes, absolutely. So the idea is, let's say like I was an intern and he's like a super executive, right? Where he just knows the product or the tasks and stuff inside and out, etc. Well, actually, like executive is not the right way, because I don't think they'd know that. The senior, okay, all right. So I'm an intern, he's a senior. We both still have 10 points, and 8 points means the task is going to take us the entire sprint. And for Tony, that might be a project 10 times the size as mine. If there's a project that is going to take me longer than a sprint, per our rule of thumb, we have to break that task into size that will fit for that sprint. So you break up the project. Let's say like it would take 2 sprints or 4 weeks of work. Then we would just split it up into 2 parts, at that point. So yeah, very subjective, and it's helpful because the sprinting, the point system is how long it will take for that person for that sprint. And yeah. So if there was more people on the team, right, like the points aren't universal. They are subjective to the person assigned. So yeah, if you were working in a team, that's kind of a different like complexity to sprint planning. That can be addressed with the same system, but I won't go into it because that doesn't apply to us. But there is a philosophy behind it all, and there is a way to handle that situation. Okay, so we have a little bit of time, and I'm really excited about this segment because we pretty much covered the sprint number one. You know, yours was good, mine was mediocre. Sprint number two, we'll actually cover this upcoming Sunday because we're halfway through the sprint right now. Oh wait, we'll cover it eventually. We'll do the same thing with sprint number two, but um, up to you guys in chat what we should talk about next. We can talk about what we have planned for sprint number two. Obviously, you're going to hear it in the next Speaker Sunday. So the other option, if you don't want to hear about that, because we'll talk about it anyways eventually, we can talk about what we think is the MPV for Lords of Nysera. Because that's a very interesting topic in of itself. So, yeah.
Unsurprisingly, Mr. Blonde wants to hear about the plans for Sprint 2.
Okay, sprint 2. All right. Okay, yeah. What are you working on this sprint, Tony?
So, if any of you watched the video that Lilette just released, you'll see some of what I've already done this last week, and that was firearms. So there's a new character, Lanoa, who she's a sapper. She uses explosives. She uses rifles, and so I had to add in all the code to make sure those items worked. There's probably going to be bug fixing I do with them because they're new additions, but that's what I did. So I even got my sticky note here. So I added portraits for the characters. I had to do some fixes. I added the bombs. I added the sapper unit, which was like a brand new unit for the most part. I added in the firearms, and then because I was in the same sort of realm of items with the explosions and whatnot. Sorry, I fixed up and finalized the meteor spell. So meteor is a spell I've been wanting to try out for a long time, and so I added that in kind of I finally finished that at the end of that first week. And then I also did some more portrait work for a few other characters that are going to be included in the chapter. So it's actually a backer character. So that was really fun to finally finish a backer character. And I also did the unit sprite for her. So I added in the bard as well. But the bard isn't completely finished. They don't have all their skills working just yet. So I need to do that probably. That's what I'm going to be doing this week. So what's on the docket is spells. So we've got, because this is a battle against a bunch of earth mages. So we've got Tremor, Earthen Wall, Shapeshift, Stone Skin, Reform, Empower, Blaze, and a new ability called Chanting or Spell Singing. So that's what I've got on the docket. It's going to be pretty cool. I've been wanting to add these spells in for a long time, especially because I need to expand out the earth spells in general. And I already have all the sprite work done. So it's all just going to be code and making sure that they work and they look cool and they sound really neat, and making sure that the effects do what I want them to do. So the actual like damage part. So that's the funny thing about the spells. Code wise, it's really easy to add spells in. They just like do a thing and they usually hit an area and it does damage or leaves an effect. But visually, it's a lot of work because you have to pretty much code lots of these things to move around and create effects and whatnot, and you have to do it in just the right way. Otherwise, it can look clunky, right? So most of the work is actually just making them look neat and awesome. Otherwise, the code is like already done for the most part because all I do is like copy and paste from this big list that I have all the values. I just copy it into the game and it just like automatically works usually. It's just a matter of making it look cool. So, you know what would be interesting? Because like so in my game, it like when you're looking at all the characters, our game, sorry, it shows all of the levels. Like typically, like the level is all that's shown, right? So if they're level 20 or level 10, then it should show when you're picking units. I don't remember, but it should. But it would be neat to have like a way that we calculate more or less their power level, right? So that they have a like if they have really high level equipment, they have extra skills that you've trained them with. and so on, like that you've invested into them, that it actually increases a power level that shows like maybe an arrow or a star next to their icon when you're picking units, so that you know who's like needs a little more work and who's really good for now.
Okay, so somebody just told me that I was muted the entire time. Cool. So I guess I'll just recap. I would like an easy way to tell units which one is better, which one is worse, like comparing, contrasting them. So when I'm building my army, I can quickly see that even if there's a differential between the levels, say someone's a level 20 character, someone else is a level 10 character, I could easily see that their base stats for the level 10 character, it's worth putting experience into that character, even though, because so that's something that I notice. Like it just like annoys me so much with TRPGs when I can't craft my beautiful army, by being able to assess the potential of each unit. So that is something I really want to improve on with Lords of Nysera, and I think we definitely can. Um, yeah, so forgot to add my answer to what we're working on for Sprint 2. I'll be working on Game Maker training. So, like I said, I'm really biting at the bit here to get my little paws on just UI, UX, all the suggestions and bug submissions that we've had in Discord thus far. I am so pleased and happy with just the playtesting that's already been done. But in my mind, I'm like, if we can't fix these issues in a timely manner, we're always going to be playtesting up front, and then just like this period of time where there's just like, we have too many requests to deal with. So, we're playing catch up. So my intent is, to get onboarded as quickly as I can so I can start assisting in that. So yeah, that's what this sprint is all about, is getting that training. And then also someone in chat just commented on the RNG system. I believe you're commenting on the RNG system, right? But they said, I like that randomness. It feels slightly more realistic. However, there should be ways to fudge growth. So I don't know if you're saying if you like the randomness of not being able to compare units side by side and see which one is better. Is that what you're commenting on, or I just needed some clarification. Oh, okay, that's totally different. My apologies, sir.
I think they mean more like that they like just the random quality of growths in general, which a lot of people do like. And that's why like it was actually the original system that the game was made with. But then I was trying to test things out, and I didn't have a good way to test it with random growths. Um, Looking back, I could have come up with a different method, but I was like early on the development and was struggling to like figure out how to do some systems. And so I ended up making a fixed growth system that I could switch between. So you can do either. When we're going to have it so that like there's a when you start a new game, you'll be able to do like these kind of pick these panels, kind of like Diablo has like easy, hard, super hard sort of thing, right? And then I want to have just a custom one off to the side where you can just do custom settings, and you can change the settings to your heart's content if you want, with randomness, difficulty, etc. So
Okay, and then my question actually back to you. What do you mean by fudge? Because I kind of think of fudging in terms of what Tony's done so far, which is if you have a really buff character, they are going to be more likely to gain stats in the strength stat, for example. Is that what you're talking about? Like fudging in a way that is appropriate for that person? Not exactly. Okay, all right.
he means more that like you have agency in what their growths, like what their stats are, right? Whether it be like there's items that you can give them that improve strength, right? permanently or like just a +3, and then which that is in the game. Like there's every couple of levels you get to do that. You get to pick a certain stat if you feel like they're not strong enough, they need a little more strength. And then there's like so many items in there that like do the same thing. Yeah, so that's an interesting one. So there in Fire Emblem games especially, there is there's like historically always been a special like super special item that increases growth, which would be very powerful in this game, especially because the stats are retroactive. So the next time you'd level up, it would check for all the levels. It checks all the levels you've gotten, and then it would add on extra ones. So if you're level, you know, 30,
Well, you're talking about um, the comment increasing the chance they increase the stat, right?
yeah, yeah. So that would be a stat growth item. So that would be like you drink the sap of a special tree, and it increases their tendency to actually improve that stat. So in randomness, it would increase your chances to roll that, but in the fixed stat, it would increase the amount that is added every level to a pool, which determines whether or not you get that stat. Is how it works.
I really like that. I really like being able to increase your chances. That'd be really neat. And it would complement having the stat, like the percent chance to increase right next to the.
So here's a little insight into the lore and the game as well. So um, the growths also so every growth is tied actually to a god, and more so like their realm of effect on people and life in general. And so, for example, Helja, the god of fire, um, anyone who has very high dexterity growth, they have they increase their resonance with that god actually, because she is a god of like of creativity and like and smithing and the making of things, and so that dexterous aspect of moving your hands and such um, is part of her realm itself. And so if someone has a high enough stat, they get marked by Helja. So you can actually, if you find a special item that increases that growth, or if you do special events of the game by talking to someone, or they have a revelation about themselves that they actually change their, you know, their view on the world, or they train hard enough through a companion thread, they can get tiny increases to that growth stat actually, to the point that if they get high enough, which is it's 90%, if they hit that 90% mark, they get marked by the god, and that gives them these permanent like added stat boosts. So they're like a permanent +3, kind of like an item would do, but it's a skill that does it. And then they also get a special skill. So you can get these really cool improvements just by doing that actually. And then there's a whole bunch of other lore stuff. But like the growths do more than just actually give stats in the world and lore as well. So there's that bonus little tidbit.
And that concludes our Speaker Sunday. Yeah, really appreciate you guys coming out and seeing us. And really great questions, too. Sometimes you guys throw curveballs, and I'm like, wait, I haven't thought of that one just yet. So I love it. And we'll be doing Reca Wednesday this Wednesday.
We might even have Lilette up to speed on the IDE, so she might get to do some work. I want her to do some arenas because the arena is very fun to do and it's very straightforward, and she would probably like doing it.
I would. Actually, okay, I forgot to tell everyone what I'm working on for Sprint 2. The arena. So, like, besides, like, Game Maker training, one of the things that Tony was thinking of handing over is the arena, or creating, like, a, I guess, like, a bunch of scenarios. So, like, one battle be testing out this the new one of the new spells, and then another battle that tests out another one of the new spells. I was kind of thinking of having a little tournament version where you can click on in the arena tournament, and then the tournament is basically themed consecutive battles. So you start out really with low level characters or enemies, and then all the way up to the boss at the end. And that would be a great way to test the numerous spells that he's added this last week. So like the first spell is just fire, and then you have like the ice, bandits or what have you that are a little stronger, that sort of thing.
It would be cool too that once you lock in your team, right, you can't change them up. So you got to be able to win with the same team throughout the entire tournament. So that would be really fun. And I need to do like kind of an update to the arena in general. So I'll go over one last thing. So arena improvements. So the arena is easy. A lot of people have noticed. I've thought of ways to tune it to make it more difficult, but I think the best way is actually to have it be easy if you want it to be, but you can up the ante for battles, right? But have the rewards lower for the easier battles, and you have options, right? So you can say if you want to, you can already do that a little bit by reducing the number of people you have in the battle, but I want to add an even higher level of like risk involved. So if you choose, for example, to defer your turn to them, it like doubles the reward, right? Because they get to attack before you do. Or add in a feature that like kind of is a coin flip. So there's like two levels, right? So there's, you can coin flip it so it chooses who goes first, or you can defer your turn, which gives you an even greater ante. And then I want to just like add maybe like a third final difficulty option that you can like um maybe add in a like all of your units start with a specific condition, right? So they're all slowed or they're all something. So you can just have like these super difficult battles if you want, but if you win, you get some seriously good rewards. So and then yeah, and then the gauntlet. The gauntlet would be, or like just gauntlet runs or tournaments would be a great fun way to add more just stuff to do in it. So yeah, that's what we're doing. That's not going to be in this sprint, the arena, but maybe the next one. We'll see. It depends on if I finish chapter 3, or if I feel like I'm close to getting all the stuff done. Because I want to finish up chapter 3 in another sprint in the next one. So
But that's all we've got for you guys. Thank you so much for joining us. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your week. And the holidays are right around the corner, so drive safe wherever you go or fly. And happy holidays.
bye guys.